There's an interesting story about the start of Showboats. Um, at the when the magazine was in its very infancy, way before it had even published a first issue, I was trying to start another magazine called Beach Life, and I was looking for investors, and I wanted to write. Coastal Living was the magazine that I had in mind, which became very successful, and I always felt like I was in the just maybe 1/4 degree off, or that would have been my magazine. But at the same, in that period when I was putting business plans together and looking for investors, I heard that there was this magazine starting in Fort Lauderdale to cover the big boats, and that it was going to be an international effort. There was going to be publications in France and Germany and the United States at the same time, in different languages, and England. And so I got in touch with the person who at the time was the managing editor or editor-in-chief of the publication, and we met in New York. And he looked at my credentials as, having, published books and run 2 different magazines in the field, and he hired me on the spot. So I moved the family down to Fort Lauderdale, 6 or 7 months before the first issue was published. Well, within 3 weeks of arriving in Fort Lauderdale, the managing editor-in-chief at the time, got into a fight with the owner and quit. And so we hadn't even bought our first computer yet. This was in the old days of the early Apple computers, the 1 unit. I don't even know what they were called, but I'm sure you remember. So I became the editor-in-chief and the publisher, and had to sort of put the magazine together and design it and find the advertisers all at the same time. And I did that, and I put enough together for the first issue. But the problem is that the reason the first editor-in-chief quit was because the guy who was the owner of this group, who had gotten a very large sum of money from a big German company called Axel Springer, which was one of the biggest publishing companies in the world at the time, to start these magazines. He was a thief. And every time he would come to visit in Fort Lauderdale, he would take all of our petty cash, which we were planning to use for buying computers and things that we needed to start the magazine. And he would send us invoices for his first class, transatlantic airfare. And, at a time when we weren't even able to, in fact, I had to go to one of my most important clients, which was a company called Broward Marine, which was the biggest at the time U.S. yacht maker, and go to the owner and say, I need $100,000 to publish, as a down payment to publish our first edition, and I don't have it, and the publisher won't go to press. And I said, is there any chance that you could, pay me in advance for the year of your advertising? And the guy thought about it for a while and said, okay, and wrote me a check for $50,000. And I went to MTU, which was our second biggest account, and did the same. And I got 4 or 5 of my most important advertisers to chip in to pay for the first. And I knew this was not a sustainable business model. So I went out and I found that a guy named Daniel Filipaki, who was the owner of Hachette, which was not only a big French publisher, but also becoming the premier publisher in America. They owned Women's Day and boating and flying mag. They owned 36 different titles, El Decor, and I mean it was a huge publishing group. And I heard that he might be interested. And so I got in touch with him, and he said he was interested, and he came down to Fort Lauderdale to negotiate with this guy, this French guy who was a thief. And before he met with him, I wrote my letter of resignation and handed it to him, even before he owned the magazine. And I knew that that would give, since I was the editor, in chief and the publisher, and I had all the relationships in the production and the editorial and in the advertising sides, that the magazine was worthless without me, and I really wanted Philippaki to, so he was able to bargain with this French guy who wanted $850,000, and he ended up with $250,000 for a magazine that had never been published. And so essentially I could write my own ticket with Philippaki, who was now he personally owned the magazine, but he gave it to the Hachette group to manage and to underwrite. And so we got the computers we wanted, and we got the hires that we wanted, and the first thing I said is, I don't want to be publisher, I want to be the editor-in-chief, and I can do both. And so before the second issue came out, we had a publisher who was going to put the advertising program together, and he was very good at that. I mean, he'd come from Yachting magazine, and the magazine just took off like a rocket ship. For 8 years, compared to our projected balance sheet, we performed the best of the entire group, even though we were by far the smallest magazine in the group. But I used to go to conferences in New York with all the other editors and chiefs and publishers, and remind them that our readership, being the kind of people who owned large yachts, would be that we had a gross national product, or a gross annual product of our readership that was far bigger than most of them, even the ones that were had circulations of 500,000 readers. Ours was only 50,000. Our average reader earned $850,000, had a net worth of $4.5 million, and this was back in 1979, 1980, when those were mighty huge numbers in the world of publishing, and we used that to leverage a lot of advertising into the magazine that wasn't yacht related, but people who wanted to be associated, companies who wanted to be part of this exciting mega yacht world that was surfacing at the time.